Imtiaz. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Yes, wonderful you're able to join us now. Imtiaz. This is obviously a follow up from last week's discussion, or I would say an extension of last week's discussion, where we spoke about the month of January, we spoke about crime, but we also spoke about the youth as well with regards to the crime. Now, just looking at where we are at this point in time, the year is actually flying. We're already two-thirds into the month of January, and the month is almost over, Imtiaz.
Absolutely. It's back to school now as well. So that's something we've got to be very cognizant of. I think the climate of COVID has left many matriculants dissatisfied with actually the intent of why they are in fact matriculated. So that's something that's very considerable, and that's something that we need to look into as well. Um, the the idea of going to university and the understanding of doing it right now in this time has also become very compromising on many families due to financial constraints. So that's something that's there. But being said, and let's get back into the issue of the youth in itself. What we find is that the norm has become that whenever we're looking at platforms, whether it's safety forums, ward committees, and those kinds of things, the youth are tending not to appear in those forums. And that seems to be a bit of concern, because then we end up with no succession in everything community related, whether it's a ratepayers association, or whether it's a CPF forum, or whether it's a neighborhood watch, or whether it's a civic body. We're not finding the youth there. They're busy in their own lives, and I'm not too sure exactly what it is that they're doing at this time.
Yes, I think you raise a very, very important issue, but we know that youth have been the target, whether they've been at school, whether they've been at university as well, and this is the reason why youth need to get involved because even with this kidnappings that we've seen young children being kidnapped, and let us not be or shy away from the fact that there is no crime that is taking place in schools. We know about drug addiction in schools. We know the youth are being compromised to a certain extent in schools and also at university level as well. There are certain threats, and it's important for youth to be involved so that they can recognize these threats that are staring them in the face,
Yeah.
Imtiaz.
No, absolutely. And let me just quickly get into the issue of drugs. We as adults have become known to try and understand drugs, or relate to drugs in a very different way. It's something that's harsh and nasty, and you'd see a pipe and you'd see people falling down stairs and things like that. In actual fact, it's not that harsh anymore. Drugs right now is in very simple things, like, for example, bronchial. And if you go onto YouTube and all of that, and if you look at the bronchial pandemic that's happening out in Zimbabwe at the moment, it would give you an understanding of what kind of things our children are currently doing. Opiates that are over the counter, still pain tablets, Xanax. I mean, Xanax are being sold in the streets at the moment for like 150 each, and that's happening in our schools at the moment. Now, what we need to remember is that, and I don't know whether the listeners are aware, but there is a bronchia where you take and you put into Sprite or Supermoo milkshake, and you'd now sip that up. And at the end of the day, you'd see the kid would be like a zombie the entire day, like pretty high, but not coherent at all, doesn't understand what you're saying, and is just looking at you with a blank face. So we need to start being receptive to these things, because quite a few of the times we tend to pick up on these things very late, and it's too far gone with the child where they're now into other things. So we call these stepping drugs. And you'd start with something like this, and you'd go into rock, and you'd go into tech, and you'd go into cocaine, and you'd do all funny things. And when it gets to that stage, then parents start waking up and say, there's something wrong with my child. But I'm saying we all as parents need to be very aware of the realities of what's on the ground. Start watching out for your children over drinking cough mixture, still pain tablets, always taking a Panado, or things like that. Those are the telltales of what is going on in society at the moment. But being said, Inayat, I think it's very important for us to understand what youth means in the context of South Africa. Youth does not mean school-going children. Youth means anyone between the ages of 13 and 35 years old. 13 to 35. That's the youth in the context of South Africa. And what we find is that generally when we're looking at activism organizations that are trying to bring change and bring difference, civic bodies, whether it's outreach programs and that kind of thing, we find that people that are attending these things have already lived their lives. I mean, their children are big, they've been through university, and now it becomes sort of more hobby than an actual activism route. And that's a cause for concern for us. We need to get those children, that gap between the ages of 18, where you finish school, and 35, where you now getting married, and you either not married or you're about to get married, you're still having your first child. We need to start developing activism within that grouping of individuals, because that's where we build character, and that's where we build lifelong changes in your life. In terms of how do you progress through society and how do you come out of it. It's pointless us coming out and saying, we want to be an activist, and we're sitting and we're 60 years old and we can't even run, and we have all of these problems. And currently, I really face that at the moment. I mean, there's so much we could have done 10 years ago, and right now we find it very difficult to be as active as we would have been back then. Like, for example, I was telling the guys the other day that Lady Smith is in floods at the moment. And if it was 10 years ago, we would have all jumped in our vehicles and we would have headed out there to provide some sort of relief. But today, we really can't do it. But where's our youth? Why are they not doing it? Why are they not active in that part? Because we haven't created succession.
Yes, and I think we need to, and we do understand that, and I'm glad you qualified, the definition of youth, and
Yeah.
looking at, the challenges that they face with, and most of the challenges are faced by people in those categories. Like you said, many of us, we've lived our lives. These are people that need to make a life for themselves. They need to go to school, they need to go to university, they need to get jobs, they need to get married, they need to find a house, they need to buy a car. Now, all these challenges are faced by people or by youth up to that age category. And they need to obviously get a lot more involved so that they get to grips, they can understand what some of these issues are, and also being organized, being part of civic organizations that address some of these issues is going to help them personally in their lives.
No, absolutely. I mean, if you really go around and you look at it, and if you look at statistics, it will tell you that crimes not committed by people that are elderly or are elderly in age. Yes, there might be some of them that are orchestrating organized crime and that kind of thing. But the youth themselves are, in fact, involved in crime. Your hijackings are not happening by old people. They're not happening by children under the age of 13. They're happening by young lads between the ages of 19 and 25. That's where it is. So how are we, in effect, and in the context of the South African context, let's leave race and all of that out of this. In the context of South Africa, we need to get that right. Why is it happening within those age groups? What are we doing? And if you come into certain areas of society, you'd see that we breed a certain culture. Like if you come into, and I wouldn't want to point out any particular area, but if you come into a particular area, you'd see that people tend to dress the same, they behave the same, they wear the same type of shoes, they wear the same type of outfits. And the behavior around the attitude of those people would tell you the direction of the children. So if you understand what I'm saying, the company you keep reflects who you're going to become. And I'm saying we need to start changing that attitude as adults in society to say that these are groupings of, and realistically speaking, when you're looking at, for example, drug dealers and criminals per se in society, no matter where you come from, whether you come from an Indian area or a black area, it's really idolizing the attitudes of those people that's creating a major issue within our schooling system, because you want to be a part of that. I mean, it's the roughest gangster that gets the prettiest guy. It's the roughest gangster that has the nicest car. So all of these ideals are now being portrayed into our kids. And that's now projecting in society and creating a bit of an issue to say that this is the direction we want to take in our lives. You understand what I'm saying? So I'm saying we need to start inculcating in our children, or if we're living in a particular area, we need to start mobilizing parents. And we've got a program called Mums Against Drugs and things like that, where we need to start mobilizing the attitudes of our children towards the correct direction, instead of them hanging out with basically criminals and them starting to now, solicit them and get them involved in those activities. And then you start building a character of an individual, which becomes very difficult to take them out of at a later stage in life.
Well, Imtiaz, this is not a topic that's going to go away. I'm sure you and I are going
Yeah.
to be engaging a lot more on this particular issue. I think we've just basically scratched the surface
Just
of what we're trying to speak of. So I'm sure over a few, in the next few weeks, we will unpack a lot more on this particular aspect. But for now, We thank you. We say Jazakallah to you for your time with us. As always, Imtiaz. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Imtiaz Syed, Chairperson of eThewini, secure with us this morning, which brings us straight on to 9 a.m. We're going to go for a break. We'll be back.